Washington State is a spot known for its snowy vistas and picturesque scenery this time of year, and my husky Max and I love it. The snow was part of the reason I moved here after doing my 8 years in the military, not wanting to see sand or feel heat for the rest of my natural life. I thought strongly about Alaska, but I wasn't in love with the price of supplies or the cost of living. So I moved here last February and got to enjoy a couple of months of snow before spring came in like a lion. The spring and summer were pretty mild that year, but I was eager to see the snow make a return appearance. By August, I was making preparations, winterizing my house, making sure I had ample firewood, and laying by supplies in case Max and I got snowed in. You know, the whole 9 yards. So when I woke up one morning to snow pattering down on the front yard, I was excited. Max and I like to take walks, usually in the evening after my shift at the pop-up storage where I work security, and today, Max was extra excited about the prospect of playing in the snow. He was waiting for me by the door when I got home, leash in his mouth and brushy tail wagging as he looked at me expectantly. The look made it very clear that he'd waited patiently all day to go for his walk, and he was ready to go blundering through the snow like the oversized puppy that he was. He had to wait for me to get out of my uniform and put on some walking clothes, but he bore it well. Soon we were traipsing through the winter wonderland, and Max was loving every minute of it. We stayed on leash until we got to a spot near the woods where I'd taken him before. It was a big open field that no one owned, at least to my knowledge, and when I let him off the leash, he was all smiles as he barreled into the snow. I'd brought a tennis ball with me, but after a few throws, he seemed more interested in something in the woods. I, too, had seen slight movement from the wood line, and as I watched him sniff around, something told me to clip his lead back on. Max was a good boy, but he was still prone to chasing. It wasn't too big a problem out here, but if he went blundering aimlessly through the snow, he could get hurt. I had taken the end of the leash, calling his name as I prepared to hook him up, when suddenly a perfectly white rabbit came bursting from the snowdrift. It was gorgeous. Its fur, the almost white of no color. There were some flecks on it, but I began to suspect that they might be dirt that had stuck to it. I was enchanted by the creature for half a second, but that was half a second too long for Max. He barked and ran at it, the rabbit taking off into the woods as Max ran off behind it. I took off too, cursing all the way as my feet crunched in the snow. I should have been faster to leash him. I should have known that he would chase when I saw the rabbit. But my hesitation at the sight of it had cost me. Max's footprints were pretty easy to find. A blind man could have trailed my dog pretty easily, and as I went deeper into the woods, I could hear him barking as he kept chasing that damn rabbit. I kept calling his name, hoping that he would come back, but the deeper I went, the more I thought I'd lost him. It took me some time. My adrenaline was running high, and I was worried about my dog, but as the sun started getting low and the woods started getting less visible, I began to feel something on the back of my neck. Not the snow. I had been feeling that for a while, but it was a feeling that something was watching me. As the sun sank lower and lower in the sky, I could see something big moving in the trees, just behind or to the side of me. I thought wolves at first, but I hadn't seen any report of wolves in the area. I knew there were bears, but they didn't usually bother people, and they were hibernating once the snow fell, weren't they? Whatever this was, it was bigger than any bear I'd ever heard of. I wondered if it might be a moose. They came down from Canada sometimes, but I couldn't think why a moose would be stalking me through the woods. Whatever it was solid white and making no effort to hide itself. It was like a moving snowbank, and whenever it saw me looking at it, the creature seemed to blend in with the white surroundings, making me second guess whether I'd actually seen it or not. I knew I had. I knew what I'd seen, but looking back to see nothing but all that white made me feel like I couldn't trust myself. I felt hunted, and that brought my survival instinct to the surface. A lot of my friends had come back from the war with PTSD or nervous conditions, but I'd been lucky in that respect. Instead, I'd developed a kind of sixth sense when it came to danger, and it put me in a state of heightened awareness. It had served me well in my time overseas, and now I felt myself slip into it, as whatever had my scent was stalking me. I kept calling Max, whistling and shaking his leash, but I was also being careful to listen for the sound of pursuit. A broken branch, a crunch of snow, the fall of powder as something brushed a tree. I was listening for them all, and the deeper I went, the more I heard it. Whatever was following me was not being particularly stealthy, and I got the feeling that it wasn't used to being challenged out here. I put a hand to my waist where I had a small hunting knife strapped to my belt, and I was very happy I'd remembered it. It wouldn't do much against something that big, but it would give me some semblance of a fighting chance. I stopped often, listening for Max even as I listened for my mysterious pursuer. Every 10th step I would stop and listen, call my dog, and proceed again. The crunching of snow remained a constant, but it seemed that whatever it was had decided to keep its distance. I didn't know why. It could easily have taken me at a run and buried me under its weight, but it was being cautious, and that gave me some hope. If it was unsure about me, then maybe I could scare it away with one of the usual tricks. I was trying to remember what the best way was to scare a bear away, and landed on making yourself big before I remembered that that was black bears. Black bears were native to the area, but couldn't see one of them following me this far. If it was a grizzly bear, then I was probably already in real danger. The method of avoiding brown bears was to play dead, but if it was hungry enough, I doubted even that would work. If it was a curious moose, then God only knew what I was going to do. I didn't want to think about something like a mountain lion or a cougar. I knew they had big cats here too, but I wasn't sure what kind or whether they would come out in the snow or not. The western United States had a versatile grab bag of predators to choose from, and I was now ankle deep in the snow, being pursued by one of them. I stopped and called again, whistling loudly as I listened for Max, and when I heard a faint, familiar bark, I felt a flutter of happiness. He was alive, something I hadn't been entirely sure of, but before I could take a step, I heard a very distinct noise of the ice breaking behind me. It was followed by a second something to my left, and I felt my heart flutter mutinously. I wasn't alone. I broke into a run then, hearing them pursue me and not caring. I wanted to find Max. I wanted to get him on a lead and get out of here as quickly as possible. As scared as I was, and I was scared, I still didn't want anything to happen to my buddy. Max was just a big dumb dog. He didn't know that chasing rabbits could get him on the wrong side of something out here. I should have foreseen this when I was getting obedience training for him. If I was lucky, this would be a live and learn situation. If I wasn't, then I guess Max's next owner would have to do better. If he made it out, that was. As I ran, I could hear them getting closer. Sounded like there were more than two now, and the more I ran, the more of them there seemed to be. Sounded like a whole herd of whatevers by the time I caught sight of Max, and I put on a burst of speed, my lungs burning as something loomed up before me. I got a good look at my pursuer, and if it hadn't been so damn cold, I would have screamed. Standing between me and my dog, looking huge on its back legs, was a polar bear. It was bigger than any polar bear I had ever seen, a Kodiak-sized polar bear, and as it opened its mouth to roar, nothing came out. It lifted its paws to swipe me down, looking to bury me under its bulk, and I was helpless to stop. I could no more have come to a halt than I could have taken a sharp right turn, and I threw my hands up in some feeble attempt to defend myself. As I collided with the massive bear, however, I was surprised to feel not warm, wet fur, but cold, hard-packed snow. Hard-packed or not, my velocity took me straight through it, and the snow bear fell to pieces as I landed on the other side. I looked back, watching it break apart in total awe, and that's when I saw them. A pack had been right. There were 20 of the solid white snow bears behind me, and they had frozen like a perfect array of snow sculptures amidst the trees. Each was an intricately carved piece capable of winning a prize contest in any winter show, and each had chunky white teeth that looked anything but inviting. As I stood crouched in the snow, I wondered why they hadn't charged. Why were they just standing there? Did it only work if I wasn't looking at them? I didn't know, and I didn't care. Right then I could see Max barking and jumping around happily, and I wanted to get him back on his leash as fast as possible. Max was busy chasing the rabbit from earlier, but as he caught him and shook him viciously, I saw him fall into snowy pieces all around the dog. I ran up, wanting to get a leash on him before he could move off and maybe save the bunny if it was possible. As I came up to him, however, I saw that any body that might have existed was gone, and a new rabbit was slowly forming from the snowy ground. Max had bent to snap at this one too, but seemed to sense the approach of the snow creatures. Even as I attempted to coax him onto his leash, he growled, showing his teeth as his hackles came up, but I really didn't have time for him to test the stability of these snow animals. I'd barreled through one of them, but who knew if that was the norm? He acted confused as we ran into the woods, clearly not understanding why we were leaving, but as we ran, he seemed to think this was just another game. We ran flat out, trees whipping past us, and I could hear the animals coming up behind us. They weren't even trying to be subtle now. They were crunching through the snow like a pack of hungry animals, and when we broke through the trees and onto the road, I turned for home and kept hoofing it until our front door was in sight. I didn't let myself stop moving until the door was behind me and the locks were thrown. I don't go out as often as I used to, and after some research, I found a dog park in the neighborhood that I could take Max to. It's nowhere near the woods, and that seems to suit the both of us just fine. We had both had enough of the woods and decided that the snowy park was just fine. I did a little research and discovered that the woods I had run through often saw bodies turn up in the spring beneath the snowdrift. No one is quite sure why it is, but I feel like I may have some idea. It isn't just people either. I read the report, and they find a lot of dogs out there as well. Some of them have collars, some of them are strays, but there's a lot of missing people that are found with leashes in hand. I couldn't tell you what we found in the woods, but I'm glad to have survived it. It was one of the most frightening experiences of my life, and 8 years of that life was spent in an active war zone. No fear of death compares to being pursued through the woods by something that's hunting you for no better reason than sport. And there's nothing quite like being the prey as the winter wind deadens your lungs and the chill conquers your senses. Keep your eyes peeled if you walk the woods once the snows fall. Otherwise, they might find you too once the snows melt in the spring. You're still here. Thanks so much for joining us for tonight's spooky tale. If you'd like a little bit more spooky in your life, why not click on one of the videos that appears at the end of our story, or maybe head on over to one of our playlists where you can get your fill of spooky content. If you like your spooky a little more tactile, I've got a new book that's come out. If you'd like your own copy, there's a link below in the description where you can get your own copy of my spooky book. If you like what you see here on the channel and think you might like to support in a more monetized way, then why not come over to Patreon or become a member on YouTube? Speaking of, let's go ahead and thank our members now. Thanks to Civ Garstad and Unicorn Hollow for being our spooky ghost contributors. Thanks to Saikat, Kendall, Janet and Chris Kinsella for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributors. And, of course, thanks to Xaronan, Winter, Tyler Parker, Stephanie Carrington, Sarah ASMR, Hi Stacy, Emily Coltsfoot, and Cinnamon Fox, and Bella Lee for being our Ghostly Reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. As I said, if you'd like to have your name read out at the end of every episode that I make, and maybe get a little more, come on down to Patreon and sign up, or become a member on YouTube. Ghostly Reader tier contributors get a book anytime I write one, which is usually about twice a year. So, what are you waiting for? Come on down and give it a look. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.